Jamie Hyneman had almost too many incredible Mythbusters moments to remember, but there are some too crazy to forget, like the exploding wooden cannon that could have ended the show almost before it got started. When it came time for Mythbusters to finally wrap things up, Entertainment Weekly asked Jamie Hyneman what his favorite memory of the show was. And he said that for him, the high points were getting to do the weird stuff that they otherwise would not have had the chance to do. It goes back to when we were doing the first rocket car and I was piloting this car in the desert from a helicopter. It was like a kid's dream. There have been a lot of moments like that over the years.
That was hysterical. That was absolutely outrageous.
That first rocket car happened all the way back in the pilot episode. They were exploring whether or not it was possible to attach jet engines to a Chevy Impala, and what would happen if things went horribly wrong. Driving a car by remote control while in a helicopter is undeniably awesome, so it makes sense that it would be Hyneman's favorite moment. But there are others that are even better. Adam Savage and Jamie Hyneman may have had their differences, but there's one moment that Savage called one of the greatest things he's ever seen. Let's start with the myth. Savage and Hyneman were testing the theory that a blind person would be able to drive just fine if they followed instructions from a passenger. First, they found that, yes, a blind driver was able to follow instructions, better than either a blindfolded Savage or Hyneman at least. But what if the passenger giving instructions was drunk? Well, Hyneman volunteered to be that drunk person and requested a bottle of Maker's Mark.
He's got his Maker's Mark and he's like, "You guys mind if I get drunk in the gutter? I think that's kind of funny."
Not everyone thinks getting drunk in a gutter is all that funny, so maybe this segment hasn't aged as well as some others. But there's no doubt that it's certainly memorable.
He gets drunk not like anybody else I've ever met. His head gets red, he starts to giggle.
Savage also gave full credit to Hyneman for another memorable moment. On one of his Ask Adam Savage segments on his YouTube channel, someone asked whether or not anything they did on Mythbusters resulted in real-world changes. The answer? Savage revealed that Hyneman actually came up with a process that completely overhauled the whole industry. It happened in the Season 9 episode Torpedo Tastic, which involved trying to build a rocket-powered torpedo from 13th century Syria. The device was shaped like a clamshell, and while Savage tried to create a form by hammering away at a sheet of metal, Hyneman devised a way to sandwich the metal between two pieces of steel. The pieces had a hole cut in the center, and then water pressure was used to bend another piece in the shape of that clamshell. Savage said that when the episode aired, it happened to be seen by a company that made miniature steel drums. Until that episode, they had been made by hand with much the same process that Savage had used. That all changed thanks to Hyneman, who inadvertently streamlined the entire industry. The myth that a car could be split in half by a snowplow is the sort of thing that sounds pretty unbelievable, unless you live in a particularly snowy climate. In fact, it was so worrying for fans that Mythbusters tackled it twice. First, the results. A plow moving at normal speed is unable to split a car, but a turbocharged plow, one that's been strapped to a rocket, is indeed able to split a car. That wasn't the only thing that made this moment memorable, though. Turns out, the Mythbusters' choice of car during their first attempt really got some fans hot under the collar. Hyneman told NPR, "That involved an AMC Eagle that we used, and who knew, but there is an AMC Eagle fan club out there that collects these and was extremely upset. In fact, they wrecked not one, but two different vintage AMC Eagles, giving AMC Eagle fans twice as much reason to get angry." The wheel might seem like one of those things that doesn't need reinventing, but trying that sort of nonsense is exactly what Mythbusters was all about. So forget round, let's try square wheels. The Mythbusters crew took on the idea of square wheels in Season 10's, you guessed it, Square Wheels. Hyneman told the Toronto Star it was one of his favorite myths. "It's a kind of playful interaction with physics and gadgets you get that I love. It can lead you to places you wouldn't get to in any other way. The idea was that if you went fast enough, square wheels would kind of start to blur and give as smooth a ride as round ones. That didn't quite happen. Things were kind of alright until the car hit 20 miles per hour. At that point, what happens can best be described as a catastrophic failure. So yeah, you can consider this myth busted." But Hyneman notes that he likes this one because of the possibility of a practical use. Is there some situation where square wheels would be better than round wheels? Sure. A square wheel's corners are going to bite and propel you forward. The square wheel could be superior on snow or mud or sand. Turns out, maybe the wheel does need to be reinvented after all.
Well, that was one of the worst things that ever happened to that car.
It was fun, though.
Savage gave Hyneman serious props for Season 9's Newton's Crane Cradle, quite literally. That episode, the Mythbusters crew attempted to determine the legitimacy of a viral video that showed full-size wrecking balls used to recreate a Newton's cradle. The small desk-sized versions are pretty common, but enormous ones? Not so much. So they built several prop Newton's cradles of varying sizes first in order to work out any potential kinks before they were dealing with the real thing. According to Savage, this is where Hyneman jumped in with some brilliant tinkering. Instead of hanging the balls from multiple strings, he connected everything, making it much easier to align the balls. Savage said,
Making this all one string, that's exactly the kind of problem solving that Jamie would bring to something like this. That was really awesome.
Testing modern-day urban legends is absolutely fine, but testing some historical myths is on another level, and that's why the Confederate Steam Gun episode is a clear fan favorite. When asked about their most dangerous experiments, Hyneman and Savage agreed that the most unpredictable and most hair-raising were the ones dealing with not just straightforward explosives, but various forms of pressure as well. Savage told the AV Club, "The most recent one I think that we were both really suitably and respectfully terrified of was the steam-powered machine gun. While the sound was just lovely, both Jamie and I are laughing and standing behind every barrier we can get behind while it's shot." Hyneman went on to say that while experiments with explosives came with a bomb squad on set, pressure was a danger that was harder to form contingency plans for. It sort of sneaks up on you because there's a lot of potential for death sitting right there. That clutching hand of death makes the fact that they built a working steam-powered machine gun based on an old myth from the Civil War just that much more impressive. It's impossible to watch one of any number of spy movies without wondering if those gadgets would really work as they do on screen. And the coolest gadgets of all? Well, those have to be all the doodads inside a classic spy car. Enter Mythbusters. Season 9's segment on spy cars sees Hyneman and Savage outfitting cars with destructive gadgets that would be the sort of thing James Bond might use if he was on a budget, like a jagged pipe affixed to the wheels. The Mythbusters were basically playing bumper cars with real cars, a ton of safety equipment, and spy gear. Savage revealed, "We smashed into each other, we separated, and we both looked at each other. And I swear, on the Hyneman's face, I saw just unparalleled joy. Unparalleled joy. I've seen it a few times on that man's face." At the end of the day, that's what Mythbusters is all about. Not just teaching science, but making it as fun as possible. Mythbusters did a lot of scary-looking stuff. Sure, it's obvious that safety was top priority, but were there any moments that actually worried the cast and crew? You bet. Hyneman told On Milwaukee there was one segment in the first season that brought home very, very quickly just how dangerous some of their experiments were. They were reconstructing a tree cannon from Hungary's distant past, and yes, Hyneman says they were working with a professional pyrotechnics expert when they did it. That guy told them that he was going to be standing a presumably safe distance away, 250 feet, so the Mythbusters opted for 350 feet, assuming that would be more than safe. It sort of was. Hyneman said, "The thing went off and every piece of that tree cannon, which was chunks of wood, maybe 80 pounds give or take, flew over our heads. That was kind of a wake-up call, and that kind of thing has never happened again." In the end, as scary as it was, a close call may have saved them. It taught them a valuable safety lesson that they were able to put into practice for future dangerous experiments. The metaphor of a lead balloon is an old one. According to Science History Institute, it goes back to a comment made in a 1924 comic strip called Mom and Pop. Saying something is going to go over like a lead balloon has become a widely used idiom to describe something that is guaranteed to fail. But that's precisely the kind of absolute that scientists love to challenge. Mythbusters took on the challenge of getting a lead balloon to fly in Season 6, an experience that Hyneman later told Time was one of his favorite experiments ever. "I love that it didn't include any explosives, but it was such a clear celebration of process. And after all this time, more than when we started, I think the process is just so much fun." The segment is a pitch-perfect demonstration of a well-thought-out scientific process, done not to be flashy or attention-grabbing, but simply for the sake of questioning something that might seem like a given on the surface. And, of course, it ended up being much more complicated than it seemed at first glance. The experiment is a reminder that science doesn't have to be loud to be fascinating, because a lot of times it's the quiet stuff that's most interesting.
That worked beautiful. It's perfect.
There are some days where everything just seems like an uphill battle. Everyone's been there. But battling uphill isn't the hardest thing you could do in a war. You could, for instance, jump out of an airplane and fall straight into an explosion. That's what apparently happened during World War II to one unlucky airman. Or should we say, lucky airman. Alan McGee was thrown from his plane and fell 2,200 feet without a functioning parachute. Miraculously, he survived after crashing through the glass ceiling of a train station. All of that is documented. The question, though, is how did he survive? According to the stories, the blast of an explosion beneath McGee countered the force of his fall. So the Mythbusters crew tried to replicate this, and that's when everything went wrong. Besides being almost impossibly difficult to test, it was so hot that the dummy they were using in lieu of an actual human being melted, and even the balloons became impossible to work with. Hyneman told On Milwaukee that it was the most challenging and most difficult thing they ever did on the show, which also makes it the most memorable.